Welcome to the Prophecy Club. Our topic today is there's a new currency coming, and also Russia is actually winning this war with Ukraine. And according to the prophecies, it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop until Russia and all of her buddies come down to attack Israel for Armageddon when Jesus returns. It is World War III. It is the final war, and it's going to keep coming. And it's just too bad that more people don't understand Bible prophecy so that they can understand what's going on. But that's my job, is to understand that and bring that to you. And of course, hopefully, we prophecy students have a leg up because we understand where it's really going. All right, so let's get started. First article, giant crash coming. Rich Dad, Poor Dad author says BRICS meeting in August will put a nail in the coffin of fiat. Now, we've known this since 2010, and for those of you that are maybe new to Prophecy Club, maybe you didn't know this, but we've been watching for this since Shane Warren was told back in 2010. So it's in a tweet on Wednesday, Robert Kiyosaki, the author of the best-selling book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, warned of an impending financial crash. Now, you'd think that they would listen to a guy that writes a book that everybody buys. They listen to that more than they do the Bible or God's prophets. And so consequently, they get the late warning, but at least this is some kind of a warning. He suggested that the upcoming BRICS meeting could be the final blow to the fiat currency system. In other words, the dollar, which is not backed by gold or silver, or not backed by anything. He pointed to the BRICS meeting scheduled for August 22. Notice that date, because it was August 24th of last year when Saudi Arabia signed the agreement with the Russians that the Russians would now be protecting them from all of their enemies. And so consequently, they no longer had to only sell their crude oil in dollars. So about 1 year later, the dollar is about to be dead. You mark my word, the dollar is about to die. BRICS meeting scheduled for August 22nd in South Africa as a potential turning point. Giant crash coming, fake money, aka fiat currency, to die. BRICS meeting in South Africa August 22nd to put a nail in the coffin of the fiat fake money. Get into real gold, I agree. Silver, I agree. And Bitcoin, I do not agree. Why? Because Bitcoin is not backed by anything. Unless I'm misunderstanding something, you can't take a Bitcoin down and trade it in for a chunk of gold or silver. And if you can't do that, then the days ahead, it's going to be worthless. Take care. End of fiat fake money near, he said. Next article. Now we jump to Russia. Cluster bombs arrive in Ukraine. Now, okay, so I'm going to call them what they really are. Okay, the Moloch worshippers don't have a big army like America. So what do? Back in, what was it, like in 1950s, when Red October took place. The whole point of that was to raise up a nation that could come against and to destroy America, i.e. Russia. And they control Russia just like they control America and all the rest of the countries of the world. So what they're doing is raising up an enemy that they've created, Lucifer's created, to come against America to defeat her, a nation that can and will, and has from its very inception been started to destroy America, and that's Russia. Cluster bombs arrive in Ukraine. Now, you and I both know that Joe Biden knows exactly what he's doing. Maybe he stumbles on steps, trips over sandbags. He's an old man, okay? But the people behind him are not old, and they are not stumbling, and they're not stupid. The people behind him are very smart, and they have a plan. That plan is to put their man, the Antichrist, on the throne. And they will do anything to do it. You recall Benjamin Fulford was told that we've ruled this planet for thousands of years. We'll destroy it rather than give it up. They weren't kidding. Since America stands in the way of their Antichrist on the throne, their heart right now, their objective is to destroy America, period. So the article goes on to say, Ukraine has now received cluster munitions. Okay, We are at war with Russia right now. It's just that Russia is smart. They haven't fired any weapons that have exploded on our soil, because then that would raise up a sleeping giant and it would be a big problem. And they know that. Instead, they're waiting for the day, I believe, when the Lord will release them to destroy us in 1 hour. So great riches has come to naught. So Ukraine has received cluster munition less than a week after the United States announced that it would transfer such munitions to the Ukrainian forces. Southern Ukraine confirmed Ukraine has received them. Russia now has cluster munitions of its own, and it says, look it, we have those too. And I bet you the truth is ours is more accurate. And if there's a way that our cluster bombs can be defeated, rest assured that the Russians know how to do it. Deliberately making things worse, that's my point. Biden calls up 3,000 military reservists for NATO. And you remember a year ago, when all of this, or maybe it was a year and a half ago, all this stuff started. Matter of fact, it was February 22nd of 2022 when Russia actually invaded Ukraine, which was the start of World War III. When that started, people were saying, oh, well, there's not going to be any American blood in this. There's not going to be any American boots on the ground. Well, that's what's happening now. We are prepared to send American blood in to defend NATO. NATO's about to go to war with Russia. So what we're talking about is exactly what Dmitry Duduman was told. And at the end of this, I'm going to read it again, about the Russian bear was asleep. Now it's woken up and it's gotten very angry and strong. And now fighting off the bear is going to be like fighting off a big giant bear with sticks. That's what's happening. We are seeing prophecy fulfilled in our lifetime. The reservists will also be involved with the upcoming exercise, Operation Atlantic Resolve. This comes just one day after the NATO summit in Vilnius, Lithuania, agreed to increase NATO's forces by 300,000 to 400,000 along Russia's border, including Americans. Apparently, the stunning effectiveness of the Russian army in Ukraine has significantly shaken up the powers that to be, not to mention the frighteningly poor effectiveness of Ukraine's NATO-trained and certified army. See, so just like the news is lying to us, Ukrainians, as I've been telling you since this thing started, the Ukrainians are the Nazis. Ukrainians is the homeland of the Molochs. Ukrainians are the problem. And in this case, while Russia is evil itself, it's one evil over another. So which one's worse, Ukraine or Russia? I'm going to say Ukraine is much worse than Russia, even though Russia one day will attack and defeat America in 1 hour. But it's not going to be Russia. It's going to be the hand of the Lord taking us down, because America has fallen. It's become the habitation of devils, the hold of every foul spirit, and the cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Going on. NATO began training Ukraine forces back in the year 2014 for a conflict with Russia. From 2014 through 2022, before Russia entered Ukraine, NATO certified the Ukraine army as meeting NATO standards, which means Ukraine should be fighting as well as NATO. And Russia's just running all over Ukraine. Now, the news hadn't told you that, but if you go to some of the websites I go to, where I watch the actual videos where the Russians are just destroying the Ukrainians, they're destroying Leopard tanks. Well, I got an article here. It tells about it in a second. Let's go on. Now, most of a year and a half into the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, the world's gotten to see just how effective that NATO training and NATO certification actually is, and it's almost worthless. That's a big problem. NATO is upping their troop count from 300,000 to 400,000, and Biden is calling for reservists. So you smart people, ask yourselves, do governments move this number of troops if they don't intend to use them? The answer is no, they intend to use them. I think it's safe to say that World War III is close at hand. I'm going to say prophetically, it started February 22nd of 2022. We in the West have fomented this. That's correct. Or I would say it this way, the Molochs are really behind it. We in the West are wrong. We're backing a Nazi-infested regime in Ukraine with the intent to put U.S. missiles in Ukraine. Russia has already and repeatedly warned that missiles on Ukrainian soil would have about a 5-minute flight time to Moscow, and this is a red line for Moscow. They will not tolerate. Now, what's a red line? A red line is supposed to be, like the bully that takes his toe and draws a line in the sand that says, you step over that and I'm going to hit you. So when they say it's a red line, Moscow is saying, if you step over this, if you do this, I'm going to hit you. Now, the question is, what would Moscow hit us with? And the answer is nuclear weapons. So what they're really saying is, we're getting real close to a nuclear war, and since we already know it's coming, we already know it's going to be a surprise attack, and America will be destroyed in 1 hour. Next article, covert intel. NATO, 4,400 page plan for war with Russia is leaked. Okay, here's the story. So a German media now have in their possession details of NATO's approved plan for a military clash with Russia. Now, in yesterday's program, I talked about how so much of our secrets have been either leaked or God has just arranged, I believe, for them to fall into the hands of the Russians so the Russians can reverse engineer our technology and overcome and defeat us. That was a major part of what I talked about yesterday. If you hadn't listened to it, then I recommend you go check it out. Now, NATO's plans to attack Russia have fallen into Russia's hands. So I see this as the hand of God. I see God turning our weapons over to the Russians. I see God turning turning the NATO's plans over to the Russians. So now all of our secrets are being revealed to the Russians. So you'd have to say, well, is God for Russia? Well, I don't think he's for Russia. Russia is not a Christian nation. Yes, there's a few Christians there. But it's the hammer that God is going to use to destroy an unrepentant, rebellious nation, America, that he raised up. Let's go on. So this 4,400-page document provides for the deployment of 300,000 military personnel on high alert. The head of NATO forces in Europe will be able to make some decision without consulting the alliance. Germany is to become the main logistical hub for the alliance's forces, with the possibility of opening a second NATO ground forces headquarters in Wiesbaden. Now, there's more. Several countries will take over support for allies in the eastern flank: Germany, Lithuania, Britain, Estonia, Canada, and Latvia. NATO intends to strengthen the defense. See, this is the plans of NATO that have been handed over to the Russians. This is what NATO has been planning, and it's about to say they've been planning this for several years. So, how did NATO know that Russia was going to invade Ukraine? Well, do they have a time machine? Yes. Do they have a looking glass? Yes. Or maybe it's all part of a central plan. What's the plan? What's the objective? To put their man, the Antichrist, on the throne. The alliance intends to strengthen heavy weapons units, increase stocks of long-range missiles and artillery systems. NATO is desperate to prevent publication of the details. Strong-arm tactics are reportedly being used right now inside Germany to get the material back to no avail. I'm told certain editors of certain media outlets have already been physically beaten and threatened with actual torture by authorities trying to get the plan back. See, I see this as coming upon us because Americans have turned against Christ. Our children know more about their little iPhone. They know more about American Idol, America's Got Talent, garbage like that, than they do about the Bible. They don't read the Bible, they don't go to church, they don't give. They're not interested in supporting or building the kingdom of God. They just want to have fun. So, as they have turned away from Christ, God is handing them over to our enemies, handing us over to our enemies. One major problem with this plan: it was written prior to the overthrow of Ukraine's government in 2014 and modified step by step as the time grew closer to the armed conflict with what it describes as starting in Ukraine. Did you get that? So these plans were written some 10 years ago, and they just happened to be leaked to the Russians. Now the Russians know all of the NATO's plans. The document seems to prove that the current conflict between Russia and Ukraine was actually completely and totally planned by NATO years ago. And based upon what's in full plan, it seems that actual full-scale war with Russia is the goal. I'm going to say it again. Full-scale war with Russia is the goal of the plan. Their objective is to take out America because God has put on their heart to fulfill his will and agree and to get their kingdom under the beast until the words of God shall be fulfilled, Revelation. Russia will view sending F-16s to Ukraine a direct nuclear threat. Okay, this is another red line. I need to count them up. Somebody out there count them up. How many red lines has America crossed? I'm going to guess off the top of my head probably 4 or 5. Russia said you do this, and it could put you in line for nukes. America still does it. Okay, so essentially what it's saying is that America's crossed another red line. In other words, America is trying to anger the Russians, trying to get the Russians, the only nation in the world that could attack and defeat us in 1 hour, to actually do so, to actually attack us and defeat us. Lavrov said that Russia has privately warned the U.S., Britain, and France of the dire, look at that word, dire risks of the planned move to give Kyiv the advanced warplanes. He made clear that the use of the F-16, for which Ukrainian pilots are now being trained, was just one more example of an extremely dangerous turn of events. They're trying to say, you're starting World War III. America, you are starting it. You are making us angry. Look, there's a point here that we can't back up and draw another line. You've already crossed about 4 or 5 of these lines in the sand now. There's going to be a point in here where Russia's going to draw a line, America steps across it, and Russia doesn't say anything. And instead, in 1 hour, so great riches comes to naught. Less than 60 seconds it takes from launch to detonation of, who knows, what if they hit the top 100 cities? I read this to you. The Bible says that the earth will be moved at the taking of Babylon. So there's so many Russians, so many nuclear bombs the Russians attack and hit us with all at the same time, it literally changes the orbit of the earth. We've informed the nuclear powers, the United States, Britain, France, that Russia cannot, when someone's threatening to attack and kill you and defeat you and destroy your nation, that's probably a good time to listen, but America's not listening. Russia cannot ignore the ability of these aircraft to carry nuclear weapons. No amount of assurances will help here. What's Russia saying? It's saying we aren't going to just sit by and let you continue to stack. Maybe I should put it this way. It's as if America has put a ligature around the Russians' neck. Now, what's a ligature? Try to imagine, like one of those zip ties. Try to imagine a zip tie, except for we put it over the Russians, and we're cinching that zip tie closer and closer with every notch. The Russians keep saying, if you put that one notch tighter, we're going to attack. And what does America do? One notch tighter. The Russians say, if you squeeze it one more notch tighter, we're going to attack. What does America do? One notch tighter. Well, someplace in there, Russia's got to say, okay, we've had it, that's enough. But they won't say anything. Instead, they'll just push the button. In the course of combat operations, our servicemen are not going to sort out whether each particular aircraft of this type is equipped to deliver nuclear weapons or not. We will regard the very fact that the Ukrainian armed forces have such systems as a threat from the West in the nuclear sphere. What did they just say? You send F-16s to Ukraine, and we will be correct. We will be right and justified to attack you with nuclear weapons. That is what they just said. He warned the United States and its NATO satellites. He warned. Russia keeps, in this case, the United States is the bad guy. He warned the United States and its NATO satellites are creating risks of a direct armed clash with Russia. Where's America? Well, Actually, America doesn't know about this because Fox News and the other people aren't even talking about it. I marvel. I watch these Fox News. I have to turn it off anymore. There's so much garbage on there. I turn to Leslie and say, this is not important. The thing that they're talking about, I could sit there and make a list of all the things over the last, say, 2 weeks. These are what they're talking about. None of them are important. This is the important stuff. But they're not talking about it. The Americans are not being told the things they need to know to kick out the bad guys. Well, why? Because they want to put the Antichrist on the throne. Do you see that? He warned the United States that NATO satellites are creating risks of a direct armed clash with Russia and is fraught with catastrophic consequences. The ultra-loyalist chief diplomat said, the conditions for Russia's use of nuclear weapons are clearly defined in our military doctrine. They are well known, and I will not repeat them here once again. And you see, the Russians are getting tired of warning us. One day, probably one day soon, they won't say anything. They'll just push the button. Next article. I don't even know if I should even take too much time on this. This shows you the value of listening to your news brought to you through a prophecy teacher. Sven von Storch says, Putin has called Joe Biden's bluff. It's time to negotiate. By the Gateway Pundit. The much ballyhooed Ukrainian counteroffensive has failed. And he's not the only one saying that. He's correct. And I can tell you the difference between when he's correct and when he's wrong. In Vilnius, Volodymyr Zelensky had to realize that Ukraine will not be joining NATO anytime soon. Vladimir Putin has called the Biden administration's bluff, who set the deadly escalation in motion with their November 2021 U.S.-Ukraine Charter on Strategic Partnership. Hang on. While Western media have been hiding the truth about the disastrous Ukrainian counteroffensive from us for a month, I've been telling you that, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, however you say it, spelled out their horrific numbers Monday. Now listen to this. The armed forces of Ukraine has lost 26,000 servicemen. I believe that. Those numbers are probably accurate. And more than 3,000 items of military hardware. That's things like tanks, Bradleys. Okay, they're not talking about weapons like guns and pistols and things like that. We're talking about major military hardware. During their so-called counteroffensive, and her saying that this is not since February of last year, this is just in the last few weeks here. He also told the reporters 17 German Leopard tanks, 12 U.S. Bradleys, and I went onto the websites and I actually watched it. You can see the, and then you watch the missiles as it goes out there and goes around, and then all of a sudden, boom. And I saw a video, I'm going to say I probably saw a video of at least 3, if not 5, of these Leopard tanks blown up, and Bradleys. They would have a drone, have drone video. And they're down, they're above a tank, and there's 4 or 5 guys around the tank, some in the tank. They drop ammunition from this drone, and it hits that tank, and nobody moves. 26,000 servicemen, 3,000 items of military hardware, all during the last few weeks, 17 German tanks, 12 U.S. Bradleys. In other words, everything that NATO is throwing at Russia, Russia is defeating. Right now, Russia is already defeating NATO and America. You heard Biden say the other day, oh, well, we're not out of military hardware. We're not out of ammunition. Oh, if the truth was known, probably we're getting pretty close to it. Probably out of money. We've sent gold, silver, dollars, and all kinds of munitions. Now we're sending F-16s. And what comes next? Blood. American blood. We're about to send American blood over there. The only hope to break through the massive Russian defenses is apparently to supply banned cluster munitions to Ukraine. No, and when they supplied the banned Russia cluster munitions and they don't stop the Russians, then what do they send? The next is American blood. Russian Foreign Minister said, search for ways to settle the Ukrainian crisis peacefully. TASS reports, Kyiv and Moscow were already to close to were already close to a ceasefire in April 2022, according to a former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, before it was torpedoed by Boris Johnson, presumably at the behest of the Biden White House. Now, if that's true, what did that just say? It just said that peace was very close between Russia and Ukraine, but the Biden White House, or the Molochs, stopped it. Well, hey, nobody wants war. Oh, yes, there are people that want war. And that is, their objective is to take out the Christian nation that is standing between their man, the Antichrist, sitting on the throne. That is standing between them forming a world government. That is standing between them having their digital currency and their worldwide religion. See, the prophecy student knows more news than the newsman. We know more military than the military men because we've read the end of the book. Let's talk about Joseph's Kitchen. I actually cooked this loaf of bread you're seeing here. Takes me about 10 minutes to put the ingredients together, put it into a bread machine, push a button, 2 hours, 20 minutes later, I get a loaf of bread out like that. Now, if you cut that loaf of bread that weighs about 3 pounds, the loaves you get in the store have most of the good stuff removed. The loaves you get in the store are about a pound. That's 3 pounds because it's got the good stuff still in it. Cut that into 14 slices, and if I eat a slice in the morning and the afternoon, I'm satisfied. So on that basis, one loaf can sustain, I didn't say it's everything we want, can sustain one person for a week. Based upon that, it'll get you excellent nutrition. It tastes good, long storage life, 10 minutes to combine the ingredients, 2 hours, 20 minutes to make it. Other wheat that you order arrives in paper bags, which means bugs, rice, humidity can get a hold of it and ruin it. But at Joseph's Kitchen, they send it out in 100 mil thick buckets. Gives you long shelf life. It's stackable. The nitrogen infuses that hopefully gives it much longer shelf life, kills bugs and things like that. Easily resealable, keep in a climate-controlled area. And they have it in stock. This is a picture, an actual picture of part of the warehouse. Here's another picture of these. Actually, each one of those boxes holds 2,500 pounds of wheat. And I think they've got 54 of those boxes, a bunch of them. So Joseph's Kitchen can ship it to you right now. You go to most of these places, they say out of stock. So here's what you want to do. Everybody needs to get a machine package. These are the things that you need to grind the wheat berries. Put them into a grinder. 30 seconds later, you have flour. You put that into the bread machine along with 6 other ingredients. Push about 2 hours, 20 minutes later, you have a nice hot loaf of whole wheat bread. Then you have to decide how much food you want. You want food 2 people 1 year, 4 people 1 year, 6 people 1 year. And if you want to make certain you have it when the electricity goes down, you can also get yourself a solar generator, all at josephskitchen.com. josephskitchen.com. Terry Saka, Cornerstone, assetmetals.com. The world seems to be falling apart financially. Why should they call CornerstoneAssetMetals.com today?
Well, the FDIC insurance fund is now empty. Not only is it empty, it's at zero. So now all bank bailouts are going to have to come from taxpayers. This could result in trillions of new currency notes being printed. The more they print, the more inflation we're going to have, potentially hyperinflation, and we need to protect ourselves away from that dollar.
CornerstoneAssetMetals.com. Go online or give them a call at 888-747-3309. CornerstoneAssetMetals.com. You don't have to get anything today. Just give them a call and say, hey, here's my situation. What do you suggest? I am having another level 2. Level 2 School of the Watchmen's Conference, and I'm calling this a teacher's course. It's going to be September 15 and 16. You can go to prophecyclub.com, and it'll tell you all of the details about it. And it gives you all of the requirements. I'll let you read that online. However, the big question is you're going to be saying, well, what's the difference between level 1 and level 2? Well, lots. Level 1 was primarily reading through most of the book of Revelation and teaching it. That's not be level 2. Yes, we will do some reading. But this one is designed to make you a teacher of Bible prophecy, which, by the way, our office wants to know if you went through level 1 and if you have taught or have been invited to teach from the book of Revelation and you went through level 1, send me an email. I'd like to know that. I know there's been at least one. I think there's 2, maybe more. Anyway, I'd like to know. So level 2 is to teach you to the point to where you can be qualified to actually teach the book of Revelation. Now, I can tell you right up front, we're going to have a level 3, God willing. And in that one, I'm going to require people to memorize the book of Revelation to come to level 3. And so there's going to be 1 year's difference between level 2 and level 3. It took me a year to memorize it, so I figure it'll take you a year to memorize it. Some of you may even faster. So go to prophecyclub.com and it'll give you all the details, tells you all about some of the difficult questions and things like that we're going to cover in level 2. Level 2 is going to get you real close to being a qualified teacher of Revelation. But by the time you get through level 3, having memorized the book, pastor's going to listen to you. And that's where we're going with this. Also, I'd recommend you go and get yourself a Berkey water filter. And yes, we do have Berkeys all in stock now. Also, we have potassium iodate pills, which are what you take inside of once a radioactive unit has happened in your area. As far as Berkey water filters, this is one thing you want to be sure to do is get some extra filters. This is the minimum most people will get is this one right here. I get the Crown Berkey right here. This is the one I have, this one I use. And I have about 8 extra filters with me too, because if you're using clean water, they'll last a year or 2. But if you're using rainwater or muddy water, then they clog up a whole lot faster. So you want to have some extra filters. Next is, I'll send you to EMPShield.com. If you use the promo word prophecy, you get a $50 discount. What is that? Well, it looks like this. This is the one that goes into a car, okay? And you put the red wire to the red side of the battery, you put the black wire to the black side of the battery, and the green one attaches to the body of the car. Then you peel it off right back here. Just peel that off, stick it inside of the engine compartment of your car. And the whole point is when the electricity goes off or when some kind of a suitcase nuclear device goes off, this is supposed to be able to stop that device from destroying every computer chip in your car. Because if every computer chip is destroyed in your car these days, you couldn't possibly replace them all. Throw the car away. So, EMPShield.com, promo code PROPHECY.